Okay, so major time savings with Hasura. My name is Pavel. I work at Sydney SkyShoot company. It's a prop tech company, and at SkyShoot we improve experience people have with property. We all interact with property every day. We build, sell, buy, rent, lease, own, use, and admire it. At the heart of our company and our greatest assets are brave engineers passionate about property. So if you're passionate about property as well as we do, join our cause. We're hiring. And recently we launched our big product called Buy My Place. So if you want to sell your property, you can register with Buy My Place, add your property details there, upload your photography, and then all that will be published to other 5 websites, well, 6, including Buy My Place. So that's what we call by improving experience, one website to rule them all. As you see here, we have a lot of integrations. Payment systems at the bottom, Salesforce, Address Finder, the listing portals to the left. Yeah, and at the heart of that product, we have GraphQL backend, and we picked Hasura for our backend, and I will tell you why. So previously, we already had some experience building GraphQL backend, and it took us a lot of time. Every time we want to add some operation, query, or something, we need to go modify the schema, write resolvers, write a lot of stuff, commit, deploy, wait for deployment, and see if it's working. And we didn't want to do that. We also realized that, well, the people like front end. That's what they see, that what they like, that what we are paid for. And nobody cares about the backend. Also, the GraphQL backend is not our product, so why would we waste so much time on it? Engineers' time costs more than server time. I mean, for one monthly salary of backend developer, you can buy a database server for what, a year, 3 years, depending on the size, or you can buy a tool. So let's save something here. And we wanted a solution which will build and manage GraphQL for us. That was June 2019. We considered 3 solutions back then. One was Realm, that was basically a GraphQL layer on top of Realm database, nothing interesting. We also checked Nexus and Prisma. Well, that was all the code, no UI, and there were some issues implementing third-party authentication, something like that. And there was Hasura, and it has all that and more. And I will get quickly through all these features, a couple of the features. So first, authentication. It's very easy to implement authentication in Hasura. So we all know how we work with APIs. We do, when we do some requests, we send authorization header, and has beer and some bunch of numbers and letters, and basically it represents the object to the right. So for Hasura to authenticate you, you just need to make the JWT token and include these 3 mandatory things. And well, ideally you won't have user ID there as well, but it doesn't matter who make this JWT token, the third-party system, your own backend, or I don't know, some device. As long as these things are there and these both systems share the same key, like Hasura and third-party systems share the same key used to create this JWT, it's all just like that. It's very easy. Authorization. Hasura has authorization. Well, once we authenticate it and we know that Alice is Alice and Bob is Bob, we can tell who can do what. So if Alice wants to read Bob's data, we can prevent that. That's why Alice looks so frustrated. Well, if Bob would try to do the same, he would not be able to do that, but looks like Bob doesn't care. Events. Events, well, it's a very powerful feature. When something changes in the database, we can kind of send events. So Alice changed the document, and we can send an API request to some cloud API, some server, and it will have 2 copies of the document, the old and the new, and we can decide what to do with that. So for example, a new user is created, you can send an email using that feature. It works for when we create something, when we update something or delete something, and we can pick what we want, what kind of event we want on which table. Migrations, that's kind of the thing all these famous frameworks have, like Ruby on Rails and Laravel. So Alice changed something in the database, Bob changed something in the database. How the whole team know about that? Well, Hasura supports migrations. It's just keep record of all the changes and you submit them to the Git version control system, and your team always have the latest schema. It's good to have. Subscriptions, it's a very powerful feature which allows you to connect through WebSockets to Hasura and always get the fresh data. Basically, instead of making a query, you create subscriptions, and once the data changes in the database, you just get a new copy of that object or whatever you requested. Yeah, that's it. That makes writing front-end components like very easy. You just make a component, create a subscription, and that's it. Your component will update automatically. And the good feature of Hasura that it sends you notifications or kind of new results, not only when data was changed through GraphQL mutation, because kind of Hasura is GraphQL layer, right? It will also send you updates when you change something directly in the database. That's very important because some solutions do not allow that. Well, here we have it. I think that's one of the greatest features of Hasura. Basically, we don't use HTTP at all. We just rely on WebSockets. Everything is just real time. I don't know if some of you work with Firebase. That's basically the Firebase, but without all the limitations of Firebase, just the power of SQL. Actions is a way to extend your schema and maybe connect to third parties. So if we want to make a PayPal payment, I can have a mutation like PayPal Pay. And when I call that mutation, it will go to Hasura, and we send a post request to some service, and it will return us object with the URL. And here we get it as a result. You want to send an email, no problem. You call that mutation, it will call some URL and will send an email. It will get all the parameters you pass and send you the results. It's a very powerful feature to extend your GraphQL. And by the way, you don't need to write code for all that. You just go to UI, click, done. Remote schemas. It's again, nice feature where you can connect multiple GraphQL servers to Hasura, and your client can only have a single connection to Hasura, and it will just proxy your request to other GraphQL servers. So you don't need to configure front end with multiple GraphQL endpoints, just one endpoint to rule them all. And by the way, this is the perfect way to start with Hasura. If you have existing GraphQL server and you're tired of managing it and you want to put Hasura in front, you just set up Hasura, connect it with your server, and send all requests to Hasura. You just proxy them. That's it. And then maybe for the next feature you want to use Hasura, that will work. And of course, the great UI. Everything you do through UI. We don't write code. This is what we see every day. This is where we manage our database, GraphQL, authorization, all that stuff. And the demo time. Okay, so I have, so what I want to show is a kind of common workflow we experience every day at SkyShoot. So I'm a kind of full stack developer. I have that UI, I have a one table, users table, a couple of users there. And I have a requirement that users should be able to create issues. So some kind of mini Jira thing. So how would I do that? So it's very easy. I add a table. I call it issue. I add a column. Let it be type of UUID. It will be generated some ID. The title of type text. And we will need reporter ID, which will be also the type text. That's basically what we need. And we tell it ID would be the primary key, and the foreign key would point to the reporter ID would point to the user table. And save. So that was foreign key, add a table. So now we have two tables, and now we can query them like, so let me add a couple of issues there on behalf of user one. Can do that through UI as well. Issue 1, issue 2, issue 3. Now we can query that. Yeah, title, let's see. So that's it. That's all we need to do. I just create a table. I have API, it's working. So now I can see reporter ID, but wouldn't it be nice if I can see the user actually here? Well, I cannot do that right now, but Let's see if we can do that. We can create a relationship, and Hasura is smart enough to just suggest me that here's a relationship. I just agree with that. Yeah, I like that. And now we can query the user together with every issue. It's that easy, no code written. And by the way, we can do it the other way. We can ask for user name, and we cannot query the issue. We can create reverse relationship from user. And again, Hasura just give us a good guess. This is what you probably like. So issues and title. And now I can query user and I see all the issues. So very easy. So now we have a new requirement. Once it's done, someone wants that. So users want to receive email notifications. When new issue is created, there should be notification. So how would we do that? We go to events and we create send email. It happens so that I have a URL for that. To that URL. And now I need to tell when I want that event, when the issue table has a new insert. Let's check the URL. Yeah. And we just created an event. So let's create a new issue on behalf of user 1. And save. Let's see if our backend works. Yeah. And I should get a mail soon. Yeah, here it is. Issue number 5. And the reporter ID is here. That's how easy it is to do third-party integrations. When something happens, just send it. Okay, so what's another thing? Actions. Actions is the way to extend your schema. Say I want something which GraphQL cannot give me, like I want some custom feature like favorite issue, for example. Of course, some third party should give it to me. And so I can create a new, so that would be query. Name favorite issue, no arguments. Here you need to know a little bit about the GraphQL schema, and it will return ID of type string and the URL. So here we have some API which returns the favorite issue. We don't forward anything. Let's create that. Okay, so it's ready. So let me get some issue. And I quickly hard code it in the backend. So what this API favorite issue is doing, it will just return me ID of a single issue, but you get the point, right? You can extend it as far as your imagination allows you. So now we have favorite issue here available for us to query. We can query it. Favorite issue and give me an ID and return me ID. But wouldn't it be nice if together with ID, although API just returns me ID, I would like to know that this object, what's the name? Should I make a second query? No. I can go to actions and actually I can create a relationship. And that would be object relationship because it's one-to-one. I call it issue. So the public schema, and it will reference user issue table. And that ID will be mapped to ID of the issue. I guess that's all I need. So now I call issue and title. So now I have my favorite issue returned. That's the way we can hydrate results from the third-party API. So in our system, we have some recommendation engine which just returns IDs of something. Well, some developers care about what actually this ID means. What kind of object is this? I need some values, prices, all that stuff. So that's how we do that. So you want title, you want ID of the issue? No worries, the same ID. You want reporter? Yeah, so it's just, again, no code here. So let me show you another feature, which is what, remote schemas? Yes. So remote schemas is basically a way to connect to existing GraphQL You can use it to extend your GraphQL, but I wouldn't advise you to do so. I call it BMP. That would be some public GraphQL. I don't need any authentication because I know there is some public stuff there. I set timeout to 10 seconds. And now we connected Hasura to some server on the internet. And now we have a lot of stuff available to us. And let's see if we can query it. So let me query BMP listing, do limit only 5 records and see if I get price single. Let's see, I get suburb maybe. Let's see if I get state. So let's try. So this data comes from another GraphQL server. And now I have a new requirement that every issue user has created should be linked to some listing on another third-party GraphQL server. Well, okay, so what we should do? So let's type the listing ID here. I know it's UUID. It's going to be nullable by default. Let's try to do that. So now we have listing ID. And let's repeat that query. And I would need ID of that listing from another GraphQL server. So probably take that one. And I would want to kind of connect all these listings to this listing ID just for the demo purpose. So all of them have it. That one. So now what we have, we can query issue, title, and we have listing ID. But wouldn't it be great if we actually, instead of having a listing ID, we have a listing object here from the remote schema? Well, it turns out we can do that. And what we do, we go to our table, we try to create a relationship, but it will be a remote schema relationship, and we call it listing. And we select remote schema, and then we need to specify the condition. So it goes to BMP listing table, where ID of that listing equals the listing ID from my issues table. Well, it's a very powerful tool. You see, I don't write anything, just click, and let's see if I have listing here. Yes. And I can ask for the price. So that issue is on my local GraphQL server, and that listing is from another GraphQL server, and I can easily create a relationship like this. Isn't that magic? Just no code written. Okay, so let me check. So authorization. Authorization is a missing piece I haven't shown you. Query issue, for example, title, user, name. So right now I'm an administrator, and we have all the issues belonging to user 1. Let's make a couple of them belong to user 2. Okay. So if we query, we see that there's at least one issue for user 2. So how I prevent access? So there's new requirements. A user should only be able to see their own issues they reported. And so I will authenticate as a user 2 right now by just changing headers. I send to Hasura CLI, Hasura console, and I cannot do that. Well, by default, nobody can do anything here. So only administrator can do. So if I want to give access, I become an administrator, and I want to give access to issue table. I give access to user to select everything. I go to the user table, I add a permission for user, and I allow select everything. So now if I'm authenticated as a user, now I see something. Now I can query issues, but I'm a user number 2, but I still see issues of user number 1. So how we can prevent it, how we, so we go to issue, relationship, we just, permissions, we just need to modify our permissions, make them custom and tell that, okay, where reporter ID equals to the current user ID, which is authenticated. Save that. And now I see only a single issue. You see, I don't see issues of user 1. That's how easy it is. And no system in between, no third parties involved, just one place to do all that stuff. It's quite powerful. So that was authorization. I've shown you events. Okay, migrations. So migrations, here you see, I see a couple of folders created. So when I create an issue table, I have two SQL files, like something is created, I create issue table, just a SQL code. Then I did what, add a new column, everything is recorded and I just can put it into Git and that's it. Okay, subscriptions. Okay, let me show some subscriptions. Subscription is basically a real-time API. So I want to find issue where title equals test, for example. And I want to see ID, I want to see title, I want to see, I don't know, username. And I create a subscription. You notice that button changed to the play thing. And let me become administrator again, so I don't worry about authorization. So nothing is there, but subscription is still active. That button kind of shows that it's active. And let me actually insert something, but through the database, through direct connection to the database, not through GraphQL. And here we see results appear here instantly. So let me repeat that and repeat that and repeat that. And your records keep showing up. That's so when you write front-end component and you use subscriptions, that's how easy it is to get the fresh data. It's unbelievably easy. So let me delete that stuff. Nothing there. And this is subscriptions. I've shown you actions, how we get that favorite issue, right? And we connected, hydrated, all that stuff. I've shown you remote schemas. And I've shown you UI. And maybe one additional feature is there's analyze button. And when you click it, it can show you the SQL request, which will go to the database. So you can check that if you need to optimize something. It also gives you the cost of executing that query. So if you happen to find that high numbers here, like hundreds, thousands, like 500,000 or something, that's definitely a red flag. That's what we use to find the slow queries. We just run some queries through that analyze tool and we see there is a high cost. There is sequential scan here. Well, because there's no index, I haven't created index. And that's very helpful thing as well. So I think I've shown everything what I wanted to show. So the pros of having Hasura, well, it saves enormous amount of time. It's easy to manage GraphQL backend without writing a single line of code. And just click, and it's done. Easy to extend your schema through API. It's easy to do third-party integrations. Almost all our integrations involve GraphQL. If you want to interact with third-party, there is a GraphQL query for that. And we are on support duty from time to time. Now, when the product is launched, and we found that GraphQL, this Hasura console, is a very valuable tool during the support duty. And I noticed that some engineers prefer to use SQL only. Some like to write queries by hand like me. Some likes to use GraphQL query constructor. And some like to just go through UI, pick the table, add some filter fields, click a few drop downs, and different developers, different flavors. And of course, with all the pros, there comes the cons. And so one backend developer lost his job. Questions?
That was awesome.
That was excellent. I'd say Hasura is pretty impressive.
What's the enterprise SKU that they've got up there? What's the indicative? So do they obviously can host that wherever you in one of your clouds, AWS or Azure or something, right?
Yeah. Hasura is basically as a backend as a service, which you can actually host yourself. That's what we do, and we run it in Docker containers in the cloud. So we run it in Azure in a Docker container. Right now, locally, I run it in a Docker container, so I don't need to install anything to my system. It's just quick command like run it. It just runs. Of course, there is a cloud version, but we don't use cloud. We use free version of Hasura. We don't have premium features like statistics, some other stuff.
So do they do all the updates and the upgrades and things like that as well as part of the enterprise SKU?
Probably. I don't know, because we don't use it. But they update quite often, like once a month maybe. They increase the version number. But we're still on pretty old version. I don't know, half a year old or so.
Yeah, that was a good demo. Thanks.
Thank you.
So when you showed this authorization piece and you said, I'm currently user 2, and how did you pretend to be user 2?
Yeah, okay, so here in Hasura, so now this is the headers I sent to Hasura. So currently I'm an administrator, and then I just send another header, which is authorization. I sent the kind of normal bearer token. Well, yeah, so kind of good question, because in my user table, I don't have any tokens. I don't have passwords. So how does it work? Well, it turns out I have some example front-end app, and that front-end app is responsible for giving me these tokens. So basically I connected my Hasura to third-party service. My local Hasura is connected to third-party service, and I can just, so what I'm doing, I'm trying to sign up like user 6 maybe. Like this is a good password? No. Is a good password? Yeah, so I use third-party system to authenticate, and I accept that. And by the way, at that time, if we go to user table, that user just appeared in my database. So that third-party system created actually that user in my database, and that third-party system is responsible for that. And I can ping some API. I kind of intercept what my friend is using, my front end is using, and here I can find the bearer token. And I just paste it here. So now I am user number 6. So I don't see any issues. So if I gonna get the ID of user number 6 and reassign some issue to user number 6, I should be able to see them. No. Okay, so it's where test. So I remove that condition, and now I see only one issue which belongs to me. So that's, yeah, you can basically use that Hasura UI. You can impersonate yourself as another user just by using this token. And again, that's the powerful feature that you can actually use third-party authentication system. And in our project, which we're going to launch by the end of February, we're actually using AWS Cognito as a third-party authenticator.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So you don't even have to create your own authentication. Just integrate with the existing tools.
Yeah, it's actually a good thing to, when you have very strict requirements on security, like how do you store password? What kind of security you have? You cannot tell, well, it's them. It's them. They store my password, talk to them. Like talk to Amazon.
Any other questions for Pavel?
Yeah, I had a question. What does the your sort of development flow look like? I mean, you've got one of these backends running. Do you have one for staging and prod? And how do you sort of migrate or deploy from one, or promote from one to the other as you develop?
We actually have a very complicated deployment system. We have a feature branches, meaning when developer works on some feature, he creates a branch in the GitHub. And then once he pushed that branch, we kind of deploy the separate environment just for that branch. So in Azure, we create resource group. We create so the projects consist of like 3-4 microservices. So, and once you deploy, that deployment creates all these microservices in the Azure and creates a separate instance of Hasura, because it's very easy. It's a Docker container. You just tell the Azure, create me a Docker container with that thing, and it just creates it. And yeah, and every time we start Hasura, there are some CLI commands which runs migrations, like let's apply the latest changes. So that happens often. So yeah, we have feature branches for every deployment. There's the whole ecosystem is recreated. So we have about 70 of them right now, like 70 branches is GitHub and 70 Hasuras in the cloud. So you kind of isolated from everything else. You can work on your feature, and you do not disturb anyone else. You can break things, you can experiment, you can shut it down, recreate it again. Once it's working, we just merge to our staging branch. Well, staging branch had the same deployment strategy, just recreates all the services. It creates Hasura instance, it runs all the migrations, and we have the fresh schema and everything.
Yeah, cool. So maybe that's something I missed, but the configuration of Hasura is it's config by code. So everything can be checked into a GitHub, so you can recreate.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's what I missed. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So there's basically we use Docker Compose. It's basically one configuration file, which which creates a Postgres instance, Hasura instance, and something else, and it's kind of run in isolated environment. And in that file, you specify all the configuration you need. So if you want to provide some, I don't know, configuration for Hasura, you just specify it as an environment variable in that file. And it's in version control system.
I think Robert probably asked about when you do some changes in UI, where are they saved? Because you can't ask someone else to click the same buttons again. So how do you make sure that whatever you click there is actually saved, and the next person can actually recreate the same structure, the same settings?
Yeah, so basically there's a, so there's a structure of this. So here is a kind of Docker compose file, which is responsible for booting up the Docker. And then when I run this Hasura console, and I should run this Hasura console from that particular directory, it will read that config file and start writing migrations. So everything I've done, like metadata, these actions, you see all these URLs I've entered, all these remote schemas, all these kind of tables, permissions, authentication, all that stuff, whatever I've done through UI, it's recorded here. Like the most important things. So yeah, we committed, and on the next startup, on the next deployment, we will get exactly the reproduction of what I did locally on my machine.